Hey there, this is Mark, and I am going to do a quick review of our Empower Hour from today because, I forgot to push record. And so I'm very sad that I lost the interactive content and the community discussion that happened today as part of our 8th Empower Hour with Mukunda Studio, which was on the theme of wellness for this month of August. And the name of our community discussion was Wellness. So for those of you that did attend on Instagram Live and here in the space and on Zoom, I'm so happy that you did get to be a part of the conversation and the discussion. And what I'll do for this version that will be super duper condensed is simply share the slides that we had in our discussion today, and let that be part of the content that remains in the archive and available to view at any time. And certainly this will come up again as a discussion, as the topic of wellness is a very important one that we keep seeing be in a way more and more recognized and spoken about, but is it causing and helping us to become a more well being and society, or is it starting to lose some of its original intention because so much of it can focus on profit rather than on the individual? All right, so as I go through this, I'll just simply give a couple mentions of what I'll be sharing. And for this first slide, of course, you all know you're at the Empower Hour, and the topic being wellness. Who's well if we're not all well? I'll skip these next two slides because they were basically to set the tone for our group setting and to help create a space as we were together in community. And I'll move right to this slide that does once again show the graphic that talks about our Empower Hour happening that was earlier today. And then I showed a couple of these comic strips that I thought would help sort of also help set the tone. In this one from Counterthink, it says, "We could attempt a surgical separation, but it's doubtful either one of you would survive alone." And this is the doctor looking at this co-joined twins of psychiatry and big pharma. So these two things that are intertwined, the person saying, I think that they're pretty much intertwined. They're joined. The next one, a woman stepping up to a version of a pharmacy, but pharmacy spelled with farm, F-A-R-M in the beginning. And the pharmacist is saying, take one a day with tomato and cucumber. And he's handing a head of lettuce. So if we could eat a salad a day, essentially this is part of her prescription. And then we also had one that said, if you can't convince them, confuse them. And this I offered was a lot of what we've been seeing in our current medical system, certainly with COVID and a lot of our health crises, that it just seems it can get very confusing of what is it that we're meant to do, what is healthy. We have foods that are put out there that seem to be healthy, but then it gets confusing if that's really a healthy food or not. The next and final comic here was a doctor speaking to his patient in the hospital bed. And the doctor says, but then again, why change your diet when you can just keep sending me to the Bahamas twice a year? We had a couple of slides that spoke about current situation with some of our not hospitals, but our pharmaceutical companies. And this is from the ethics.harvard.edu. Today, drug firms fund and supervise clinical trials to evaluate drug safety and effectiveness. Their incentive to obtain authorization to market drugs and to promote their use once on the market can bias the clinical trial design, oversight, conclusions, and reporting of results. What options exist to eliminate this bias? And the article does go on to a few bullet points to talk about ways that this could be eliminated. But just to highlight this situation where bias does happen in these clinical trials, and then what also ends up happening is the amount of money and funding that goes into the design and creation of many pharmaceuticals can get so high that the motivation to want to try to get people to use these is even higher in order for all those who funded the forming of the pharmaceutical drug for it to get paid off and to get used and for people to profit from it. And that becomes more important sometimes than if the drug is actually effective and doesn't have as many side effects. We also had a slide here that was from Public Citizen that's outrightly is saying Big Pharma is ripping off Americans. And we show a chart here where one side offers the revenue that the US is making off of pharmaceutical drugs, and then the other is what the international revenue is. This isn't just saying European or Eastern Eastern part of the world, but it's actually saying this is the entire international revenue compared to the US revenue. For example, we see for HIV drugs, international revenue is $1.2 billion. The US revenue, $6 billion. For autoimmune diseases, $1.4 billion for international revenue. In the US revenue, $4.9 billion. For multiple sclerosis, $1 billion in international revenue, $3.8 billion in the US, and the same for type 2 diabetes. We looked at a slide from citizen.org. This was written by Ava Fitzsimmons. In 2020, the combined sales in the US for 17 of the 20 top-selling worldwide drugs generated more money than those same drugs did for the rest of the world combined. US sales of the 20 top-selling drugs totaled $101 billion, while the rest of the world's revenues on these same drugs totaled nearly $57 billion. The rest of the world. So basically it says the US spent double what the rest of the world did. The pharmaceutical companies happily reap the benefits of laws that allow them to increase their prices at their discretion. 11 of the 13 pharmaceutical companies selling these top drugs made more money in the US from those drug sales than they did in the rest of the world combined. We then took a switch to start looking at some of the more focused ways of directing the way that we think about wellness, the way that we can consider the different sectors that wellness exists. We certainly had given some emphasis to the pharmaceutical companies, and we understood, yes, they have brought a lot of benefit, and no one can, I shouldn't say that, but I would say that we would primarily want to say there is benefit from having Western medicine. It's the profit margin that seems to be the part that we could draw easily some frustration. Certainly, we can understand that if you buy a car in one part of the world and you buy a car in the US, there is going to be a price difference, but should it be that big of a difference? The dollar, of course, is different all across the globe, but should it have that high of a profit margin? On mindbodyonline.com by Margot Badziak, it's written, it's no surprise the global pandemic sparked an increased interest in immune health. 1 out of 3 global consumers reported they were more concerned about immune health than before the pandemic started. This trend will continue in 2022 as over half, 55% of the US population is focused on their health and wellness because they want to strengthen their immune system to withstand illness and disease. Nearly 2/3, 65% of people report that they're more focused on health and wellness because they want to live a long and healthy life. 1 in 5 Americans has tried new services or treatments that support immune health, but another 46% are interested in trying those services moving forward. women being more interested than men. We talked about how the pandemic became this unexpected inspiration, and many people considered different ways of focusing on their health and well-being rather than relying on a system to tell them what to do, but to feel that there is a way they could bring this into their own hands and that they could focus on it in a way that had a different priority. Mind Body Online defines the 7 dimensions of wellness in this way: physical wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness, and then spiritual wellness, environmental wellness, social wellness, and occupational wellness. It was interesting to look at these 7 dimensions and consider, how are we doing in this regard, and which one of those is within our own hands and our own volition, and which ones do we need to depend upon our community, on our powers that be, to implement some of these in a level that really does look out for all of us. We looked at the slide here that looks at luxuo.com by Cleo Wong, and it offers 9 health and wellness trends that are expected to pull more focus in 2022. And then these were listed as digital healthcare, tracking vitals, discovering DNA, prioritizing mental health, remote work and flexible schedules, wellness tools, food for the gut and mind, sustainable foods, and regenerative travel. I enjoyed looking at this list, and we didn't go into great detail of these, but it's helpful to understand where technology is putting some of this back into our own hands. The watches, the devices, the rings, even 23andMe is something I've learned about that helps you understand some ways you may be predisposed to certain things in your health. There are gut health tests that you can do at home to understand how your gut microbiome is functioning. So many of these, again, it's putting these into our own hands rather than expecting some larger system to have all the ability to focus on us. The Global Wellness Institute.org has a new report called the Global Wellness Economy. So they're looking beyond COVID, and they predict that the 11-sector wellness economy will grow at roughly 10% annually through 2025, reaching $5 trillion by year-end 2021 and $7 trillion by 2025. Many of the reports that I saw showed that here in 2022, it was about a 4.3 or so trillion dollar wellness economy. Back to this quote here, but future growth will likely look different than in the past because the pandemic experience has sparked major shifts in how consumers understand and experience wellness and what they expect from it. Global Wellness Institute research have pinpointed 7 shifts that will have broad ramifications for all wellness markets going forward. And these 7 shifts are that self-care moves from pampering and escapism to a means for self-preservation and survival. The second one, prevention becomes a lifestyle and a bigger public health priority. 3, wellness and science move closer together. 4, we will lean into nature for nourishment and healing. 5, balancing physical and virtual connections becomes critical. 6, mental well-being takes center stage. And 7, an ongoing global value reset means people will seek more economic, environmental, and social justice, as well as more meaning in life. And that was exciting to see this list as a shift in where we've been to where we can move further and closer to having wellness as a real healthcare system. Here was a chart that showed some of the projected average annual growth rate by sector between 2020 and 2025. And in that period, wellness tourism had advanced, Thermal mineral springs was the second highest at 18.1%. Wellness tourism was 20.9%. Spas, 17.2%. Wellness real estate, 16.1%. Then we see physical activity at 10.2%. We see the growth of physical activity, which is, of course, exciting, and I wish it was higher. Mental wellness right underneath that, 9.8%. Personal care and beauty at 8.1%. Traditional and complementary medicine, 7.1%. And then a drop at healthy eating, nutrition, and weight loss at 5.1%. Public health prevention and personalized medicine at 5%. And then last, workplace wellness at 3.8%. It's interesting to consider maybe even where we feel we would emphasize these for ourselves. What would become most important? Where are our priorities and projected areas of growth for our personal wellness? And then to compare these with what's happening at large. I showed this slide here that promoted this idea that some of this is in our own hands, and being able to recognize at least to what level is it in our hands. Access is not always there. Knowledge is not always available. Being able to make this a part of our everyday life and part of our lifestyle is sometimes not available. And that's why I often feel like then we need to lean into our community. This isn't something we should do just on our own. Something that we do, that we build together. And even in this slide, this is a slide of people in the medical profession. And I felt like it's even in there, sometimes that's where we can see that care isn't happening amongst caregivers. And so Swami Satchidananda has often been quoted as talking about the difference between illness and wellness. And he wrote on the board at this meeting he was at, the words illness and wellness. And he said the difference is, he went over and circled the I in illness and the we in wellness. And so when we are working together, bringing in together all the different thoughts and different angles and perspectives, there is more of a chance that we can see ourselves moving towards having wellness. My goal for this talk was that we would understand and have conversation from areas where we've seen wellness be one of an area where it's been filled with false claims to be able to solve all kinds of issues, as well as areas of wellness that, were in the esoteric realm and felt too esoteric. We wanted to talk about wellness as it is understood from the pharmaceutical companies to how it's understood by indigenous peoples and Mother Nature for centuries. From wellness as an insurance policy to wellness that's in our own hands. From wellness that seems to be only about the body to a realization of body, mind, and emotional integrative health. From wellness that is only accessible to a few to a global wellness where all efforts impact the other. We had a lot of great input from people from different parts of the world, from Bharat, who spent most of his life in India, to Thibault from Paris, France, from Mercy in Zimbabwe, and then the majority of us from here in the US. I appreciated all the perspectives, the insights, the inspirations, many of which came from Bharat, who was saying 45 minutes of walk in the morning, then takes 30 minutes in the evening after you've eaten, rather than what usually happens, we eat and then we lounge. Not good for the body. There were many great suggestions that I wish I could have compiled and had available, but well, this is where it had to end. So I want to thank you all for listening into this and for getting this very shortened and abridged version. It's been a wonderful thing to be able to have these EmpowerHour community discussions here through Mukunda Studio, and I hope to see you for our September EmpowerHour. All right, until then, be well.